I love adverts. I think they're still really important. I think with the rise of the seismic rise of YouTube, and just how many adverts you get to see on those platforms these days, and you're kind of forced to watch them for those first 5 seconds, it makes them even more important in terms of being engaging, doesn't it?
Advertising does need to stand out. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in the noise. I think the run-of-the-mill car driving down a cityscape with music and very attractive people in it. Maybe people need to be a little more creative, because that's just going to fall in the background of all the wealth of advertising that we get thrown at us anyway.
Yeah, it disappears very quickly, doesn't it? Hello and welcome back to the Armchair Show, where we help you learn, prosper and grow. We've got 3 guests today in our socially distant studio. We've got Keith, Sally and Shaun. How are you doing, guys?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
We've talked a lot on this show about the buyer journey and how complicated it is, or how dynamic it is, and all that kind of stuff. And I could talk about that until the cows come home. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to the vehicle listing, doesn't it? That's the one thing quite often that we see. I guess not everyone comes into it via that route, but generally speaking, you see a vehicle listing and you either like it or you don't like it, or you're indifferent. In your various experiences, we'll start with yourself, Keith. What makes a great vehicle listing?
Good photography.
Yep.
First off, and it still amazes me how that simple thing gets forgotten. Obviously, I look after our website for our group, and I find it so frustrating on the first page if you have one. A waiting image is bad enough, but if you've got 3 or 4, it just doesn't look professional. I'd rather not them be on there, take them off, which is obviously very challenging. When you've got that car you've just spent a fortune on, you need it listed because somebody might buy it on the spec, but I don't get it. You've got to have their photographs, and good photography, because there's nothing worse than bad photography. You might as well not bother with that either. So
Totally agree. And can you take a decent photo with your phone? Is it worth walking around a car with your iPhone, or should you actually invest in the services?
No, you absolutely can. I probably would have said no before, but we've just been through that journey again, and there's some fantastic providers out there, and the stuff they do, photos and videos, just with an iPhone, it is excellent. It really is good. But again, it's technique and a bit of preparation, really.
Absolutely. Shaun, what do you think?
I think Keith's just stole my favourite one, which is imagery, but probably in the next 2 in order, overly wordy listings pages where the manager puts 2 paragraphs of comment, so you only get 3 cars on the listings page is probably one. And one of my other pet hates that a lot of people have probably heard before: if you're doing search by finance, then putting the vehicles low to high and completely ignoring the benefit of PCP, which is amazing the customer with the best car they can get for a payment they hadn't expected.
Yeah.
No, people put the cheapest car first, which that is something I've mentioned a few times. I'm probably boring people with that one by now.
No, not at all. I think that's what made me think as well. How do I do it? I think I do the same thing. What about yourself, Sally? What makes a great vehicle listing?
Well, I think these guys have managed to cover most of it, but I think it's using the combination of the words in which you put in, the imagery, so that people actually get a real flavour for what about that car and what's individual. Because it's very easy just to say, this is the cheapest, why is that one £1,000 more, when actually there could be a really good reason for the specification or the low mileage or whatever. So I think it's bringing out the reasons why that car is the right car at the price, and trying to get away from everything just being price driven.
Yeah. What about user-generated content? That's a big thing these days, where certainly in marketing circles, we talk a lot about the value of having users, or customers rather, generating your marketing material. Is that something in this industry that's kind of taking hold, do you think, Keith?
I think it is. I think there's sometimes people overrate it a little bit, and it's always dangerous to say. We've done a lot with social influencers and stuff like that, and I can't say I'm a big fan, if I'm honest, so I'll probably get shot later, but you spend an awful lot of time with these people, and it's I'm not so sure it's about the product, it's more about them, and it can take so much time to do it, and I'm not sure the benefit at the end of it, to be fair, especially these days there's an awful lot of technology. You can see who the followers are and how many of these have been bought, and their age profiles, etc., and actually you can narrow that right down to people that are probably actually worth talking to.
Yeah, no, definitely. Sally, what's your opinion on the influencer? I quite like this topic because it's one of those things. I remember having a conversation with a very traditional car journalist, and he went to a big launch event, and there were people there who were influencers who couldn't drive. And he said, I'm there, I've driven for 30 years. Should we be listening to these people, do you think?
I think there are a lot of people nowadays who do listen to these people, and I think if we don't bring them in some way, then we're probably missing a trick. Yeah. The problem is, by excluding them, it feels there's a lack of trust, yeah. There's a lack of interest in real opinion, and you just want to sort of generate everything officially. I guess the hardest thing is having the confidence you're going to get a balanced view through. Certainly, in my experience with things like customer experience, you tend to get the really good people, the really happy, and the really annoyed. Yeah. What you don't get is that sort of broad spectrum of experience that sits in between. So I think it should be adopted, but there's still a feeling of caution around it, and how it comes across.
And again, that's where reviews come in, isn't it? I think it's something a little bit like the hotel industry. I think it's something to be fearful of, but equally something to take advantage of as well. And quite often the people who are least happy are the loudest, aren't they? That's probably the best way of putting it. Keyboard warriors, as they're called. But you're right, there's no middle ground, is there, really? You don't tend to get that. Has that been your experience, Keith?
We spent quite a lot of time with influencers. It was decided within the business that would be a good way to go ahead. And I just found that a lot of them were more worried about their own persona than they were ours. Yeah. And some of their demands were just ridiculous. There was very, very big influence that joined us for a period of time and wanted to borrow a very expensive car, which ended up being 2 cars for him and his brother. And then we found out they weren't even old enough to drive these cars, and it was because of the insurance specifications, and we got very little out of it, if anything, rather than some big insurance bills and damage bills and stuff like that. And
not really worth that, is it?
Wasn't worth it. And I do think the trouble is you can fall into that trap because everyone says, and don't get me wrong, influencers have absolutely got their place, but whether they've got so much of very expensive cars, I don't know. Not in our experience, but for others, I'm sure it works. And I think also it depends who they are as well.
Of course, yeah.
If they're an influencer that's an influencer that is a bit different than somebody who's very famous and is an influencer, then that probably carries a lot more weight, and I'll certainly get behind that.
Absolutely. Do we think traditional adverts still playing a major role? I mean, I think the automotive industry has had some amazing and some not amazing examples of adverts. I suppose, firstly, can you think? I can put you on the spot now. Can you think, Shaun, of an advert, either recently, a car advert, or in the past that you've particularly liked?
I still go back to, I think one of the greatest adverts ever was a certain movie that alluded to what you could do in a Jaguar, which was amazing. Free advertising, well, probably not free at the time. And Volvo, Boxy But Good was in the same movie. Yep. I really like stuff like that's out there. So I think advertising does need to stand out. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in the noise. I think the run-of-the-mill car driving down a cityscape with music and very attractive people in it. Maybe people need to be a little more creative, because that's just going to fall in the background of all the wealth of advertising that we get thrown at us anyway.
Yeah, it disappears very quickly, doesn't it? Sally, have you got any? Can you remember any adverts that particularly caught your eye?
There was a Volkswagen series, quite humorous at one stage, and I remember a lady throwing a sort of a bouquet or something and disappearing off in the car. I think to me it's the ones that bring lifestyle, bring character to the cars. I agree with you. The standard driving down a cityscape or across a lovely piece of countryside, to me, don't sell the car, don't say anything about it. But the ones that make you feel as if you're part of that lifestyle and seem to warm to more and have more influence at the end.
The ones that you can kind of relate to, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. It sort of brings a life. You feel like you're a certain type of person or living a certain type of life because of the advert, rather than it looks beautiful on a sunset.
Yeah, completely. Keith, any adverts that stick in your memory?
There's 2 for me. One of them comes from the same series. I think the VW one, where there was a squeak and it was the lady's earring. I think that was incredibly clever. I remember that one. And just from last year, I hate to mention another manufacturer, but the Mercedes retirement of their president, which was done by BMW, which was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Oh, that was amazing. Yeah,
Absolutely,
Yeah.
so
I think we spoke
clever.
about that on the pilot
We
show,
did.
didn't we? And I hadn't
Yeah.
seen it at that point, but after
you
that
seen it
show, I
now?
went back and watched it, and it's just brilliant. Isn't it?
Absolutely
You
amazing.
never know. We'll have to put a link to that in the show notes. But yeah, they really stick in your mind, don't they? Hopefully that means that they've still got a place, because I love adverts. I think they're still really important. I think with the rise of the seismic rise of YouTube, and just how many adverts you get to see on those platforms these days, and you're kind of forced to watch them for those first 5 seconds, it makes them even more important in terms of being engaging, doesn't it? I'm going to switch tack completely now and just talk about attracting young talent into the industry, because we like talking about this, and I don't think you can ever get to the end of this topic, really. You all come from very different backgrounds in terms of what you do at the moment and how you came into the industry. I think, like we always say, a lot of the guests that come, in fact, most of the guests that come onto the show have very, very unique ways of getting into their jobs. The question is, though, is the industry doing enough to attract young talent? I'll start with you, Shaun.
It's a really good question. I think one of the things that Automotive's done well is making use of apprenticeship schemes, certainly after sales and places like that. We do, as an industry, take a large number, and that's been a good scheme to get young people in. I think there's probably roles where we need to get more young people in.
What sort of roles are just out of interest?
I think there's management roles. I think from certain elements of marketing, social media, and technology. Certainly, I think there's still that perception of automotive as an industry that we need to work on. If customers have a certain perception of us as an industry, then the likelihood is that people looking at it as a career have a similar one.
Yep.
And I think going to look at somebody we met with a couple of years ago was the Sophology, and the change that they did in their business, which I'm still waiting to see if anybody's brave enough in the automotive space to do what they did, which was completely revolutionise their business. They got rid of the sales. They got rid of salespeople's commissions. They almost got rid of salespeople or advisors, and they went through a big change.
And that would be huge in this industry, wouldn't it? Imagine.
It would be. It would be massive. It would be seismic. And we invited them to talk at a conference we did, and at the end of it, I said to any of the retailers, anybody up for doing what they did, and there were no hands. There were a few people that said we'd love to try, but probably not. But I think if we can make our business dynamic, and we are changing, and I think we're getting there, and the things that the retailers are doing to change consumer perceptions will also change the perceptions of people wanting to come and see automotive as a great career choice in retail.
Yeah, definitely. I love that idea of getting rid of sales. I think we might stick with that for a minute. Keith, what was your initial reaction to that when? Is that possible in this industry?
Oh, no, absolutely. I think it's on the cards for the future. I really do. I think, as I said perhaps earlier, is that I think the showrooms will become a handover area. You'll buy your car online, you'll see it online, and you'll just come to the retailer to hand that car over. And we're all about visibility, aren't we? But we're not visible. You go online and the cars, we said earlier, everybody thinks they're going to get a deal because they may or may not. We've got to do away with that. If the price you see it's got to be the price you pay. Just like an Apple phone, you know what it is. There's no dealing on it. That's what you buy. And I think that's what will happen with showrooms. You'll come in and collect your car from the showroom and be handed over. So, but one of the big money makers for us, of course, is finance. Yep. So if you can do that online as well, great. But it's those after products and stuff like that. Not often are they available online as well. And we need to be offering the tyre and gap insurance and all those sorts of stuff as well. Yeah. And once you can do all that online, then
Yeah, I guess tying that back to bringing the younger talent into the industry, is there a chance, Sally, that might open up more opportunities in terms of different roles? If the sales role becomes more sort of diluted, for want of a better phrase, will that give more opportunity for young people to come in, do you think?
I think it can do. I mean, I think there is opportunity for young people to come in. But I think sort of taking the point around the sales team and maybe removing the traditional model, that seems or feels to me to still be quite a negative perception of car sales, and I think, you know, going online, having this transparency, creating much more trust with customers, I think maybe will make young people more enthusiastic about joining the industry. I mean, we're incredibly lucky because we've got an amazing product that people love to be associated with. There's something quite sexy about cars. And I think that really does pull people in, and then they think of, you know, the traditional used car salesman and that model, and that tends to make people a bit more negative. And yeah, maybe if we change the way in which things are positioned or the way we operate, then it will become more attractive and we'll bring a different type of talent in. You know, a really good handover person who's just genuinely interested in working with the customer and giving them all the detail, rather than feeling they've got to hit a target at the end of the month and get X amount on the bottom line and close the deal before they leave the showroom, which is maybe more traditional.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at its time, but it's certainly a different time now, isn't it?
I think there was a key word that was mentioned, which I always smile when somebody uses the word retailer, not dealer, because that, you know, they should be retailers. Yep. And we should be removing that perception of dealer. I don't think that's going to help us going forward. I think.
Is that because of the stigma against that word, dealer, do you think? Or
I think there's two things that does. I think one, yes, there's, you know, it's associated in negatively with the term dodgy dealer and all of these things, but also it sets a tone as well, that there's an expectation that as a consumer you have to deal, which means, and some people don't like that, and you know, retail, you go in, you see a product that you like at a price that is affordable, that you want to pay, and you should have a great retail experience. That's the way that I think consumers will more and more want to acquire cars, and I think the more use of the word retailer to reinforce that instead of dealer will help our industry now.
We might have a show title there: retailer, not dealer. Quite like that.
I agree, and I think actually you can take the same and apply it to the after-sales side as well, because there is a perception at the moment that almost any facet of automotive you need to go and negotiate on price, or, you know, shop around to get the right deal, so to speak. And actually it's about providing the experience, it's about adding value at a fair price, and I think changing that mindset would be really impactful.
Well, that key word there is experience, isn't it? Because you're not just buying a car, you're actually experiencing the process of buying a car, which should be enjoyable. It shouldn't be. I mean, when I bought my last car, I genuinely enjoyed it, mainly because they gave me coffee which had A5 sprinkled in chocolate. But I love coffee. But yeah, it should be an enjoyable experience. There's no question about that, really. We'll just finish on this question, because it's another one of my favourite questions. If you could tell your 10-year-old self something that you've learned over the last 10 years, Keith, what would it be?
Listen more, really. Okay. As you get older, it's you know, you never listen to your father and your mother when they told you what not to do. You always knew best.
Until you turn into them, and then you have to.
Absolutely, and you do look back and go, crikey, and then you see people make the same mistakes you did, but you can't tell them. You try to, but you can't tell them. But yeah, definitely, I would go back 10 years and just listen to more some of those people that have been there, done it, probably experienced it already.
That's mine as well, I think, really. Shaun?
I think I'd tell mine, you're going to make lots of mistakes.
Yep.
Don't worry about them. I think for me, for 20 years, they held me back, being worried about making mistakes. I think it took me too long to realise that they're no bad thing. You learn from them, you can become better from them. So I'd go back and tell him to not waste those years.
Yeah, the best things come out of mistakes, don't they, really? I totally agree. Sally, what do you say?
I think to me it's about the value of relationships and actually taking time to get to know people, to listen to different perspectives. So, you know, taking the point of listening as well. Yeah. And actually how you learn so much more from it, and you get much more rounded solutions when you can engage and interact with lots of different people.
Fantastic. Sage advice all round, I think, in that case. Thanks so much for joining us today. Again, we'd love to have you back at some stage as well. We've really gone over all sorts of different things in 20 minutes there, but that's what this show's all about. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and thank you very much for coming on. Thank you. And thank you for watching. Just remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Armchair Marketing.